In today's video, I'll be explaining every plot twist that Stranger Things has thrown at us over the years. But one of these twists doesn't just change a single episode, it rewrites the entire show from season 1. Before that though, let's look at the very first one, Will's fake death. Season 1 kicked off with what seemed like the tragic end of Will Byers, with his supposed body pulled from the quarry in episode 3. Everyone in Hawkins accepted it except Joyce and a few skeptics. But episode 4 flipped the script when we learned the body was a fake created by Hawkins' lab to cover up their dimensional disaster. This twist was genius because it transformed the entire narrative from a mourning story into a rescue mission against impossible odds. Will wasn't just gone, he was trapped in the Upside Down, barely surviving by communicating through Christmas lights while dodging the Demogorgon. The fake body reveal exposed Hawkins' lab's conspiracy and showed how far Brenner would go to hide the truth. It also established the series' pattern of making us think characters are dead when they're actually fighting for survival in horrible conditions. The comics later expanded on Will's time there in The Other Side, showing how he used his psychic connection to manipulate real-world objects despite being in another dimension. His isolation and resourcefulness during those days became a template for understanding how the Upside Down functions as both a physical prison and a psychological nightmare. But that fake body was just the beginning, because the lab's cover-up revealed something darker. They weren't just hiding one missing kid. 11 opens the gate. We spent season 1 thinking the Upside Down and the Demogorgon were just natural horrors that existed independently. Then the finale dropped the bombshell that 11 accidentally created the gateway to that nightmare dimension when Brenner forced her to make psychic contact with the creature during a lab experiment. This revelation recontextualized everything about the series and made 11's journey infinitely more tragic. She wasn't just a hero fighting monsters. She was trying to fix a catastrophe she unwittingly caused as an exploited child. The scene showing young 11 reaching out to the Demogorgon, only to tear open reality itself, remains one of the most visually striking moments in the show. It established that the Upside Down existed before, but was sealed off until human interference broke through. This twist also set up the central tension that would drive multiple seasons. The idea that scientific experimentation without ethical boundaries creates disasters. Novels like Suspicious Minds later revealed that Terry Ives had similar experiences during her time as a test subject, showing this wasn't Brenner's first rodeo with dangerous psychic experiments. The gate opening became the original sin of Stranger Things, the moment everything went wrong and the domino that keeps falling. Here's what doesn't make sense though. If 11 accidentally opened the gate, who told the Russians exactly how to do it on purpose? That answer comes later, and it's worse than you think. Mind Flayer possession. Season 2 seemed to be about Will recovering from his Upside Down trauma, until episode 5 revealed something way worse. The shadow monster we'd been seeing wasn't just haunting him. It had literally invaded his body and was using him as a spy to gather intelligence for a full-scale invasion of our world. The possession twist elevated the stakes from personal horror to existential threat, because now the enemy could be anyone. Will's episodes of going catatonic weren't PTSD flashbacks. They were moments when the Mind Flayer seized control and accessed his memories of Hawkins. The gang's realization that they couldn't trust what Will was saying led to that brutal sauna test where they basically torture their friend to separate him from the entity. Joyce's desperation to save her son, while knowing he might be too far gone, created some of the most emotionally devastating scenes in the series. The possession also introduced the concept of the hive mind, showing that the Upside Down operates as a connected consciousness, rather than individual monsters acting independently. Games like Stranger Things VR later explored this mechanic in depth, letting players experience both sides of a possession and understand how the Mind Flayer manipulates its victims through their deepest fears and memories. But possession was just phase 1 of the Mind Flayer's plan. What it did next made Will's nightmare look like a warm-up, Bob's heroic death. Bob Newby seemed like comic relief, the dorky boyfriend who couldn't possibly survive in a show this dark. We kept waiting for him to mess up or run away when things got serious. But instead, episode 8 of season 2 gave us one of the most genuinely heroic sacrifices in the entire series, when he literally saved everyone's lives. Bob's death hits different because he had zero powers, zero combat training, and zero connection to the supernatural stuff, except through Joyce. He was just a good guy who loved her and her kids enough to face down a pack of Demodogs in a hallway with no weapon and no chance. The twist was that this seemingly useless character turned out to be exactly what the situation needed. Someone with technical skills who could reboot the lab's systems and unlock the doors. His final run through Hawkins' lab while Demodogs closed in was legitimately tense, because by that point we actually cared about him surviving. The show taught us that you don't need psychic powers or government training to be a hero. Sometimes you just need to be brave enough to do the right thing when it counts. Bob's legacy influenced later characters like Alexei and Murray, showing that ordinary people can make extraordinary differences, even in supernatural wars. His death also cemented the show's willingness to kill off characters we've grown attached to. No plot armor for anyone. Bob proved regular people could be heroes. But the show was about to introduce someone who'd flip that entire idea on its head. Russian-based Discovery. Season 3 seemed focused on the mall and summer romance until the conspiracy theorist and the Scoops Ahoy employees accidentally uncovered something massive. There was a secret Russian military installation directly underneath the new Starcourt Mall, and they were trying to forcibly reopen the gate to the Upside Down as a Cold War weapon. This twist expanded the scope of Stranger Things beyond Hawkins Lab's isolated experiments to international espionage and military applications of interdimensional science. The Russians had somehow gotten intel about what happened in Season 1 and decided to weaponize it, showing that the supernatural threat wasn't contained or secret anymore. Dustin and Steve's investigation through the mall's service corridors led to discovering this massive underground bunker, complete with scientists, soldiers, and a giant laser machine pointed at creating a new gateway. The conspiracy stretched all the way up to the mayor, who'd been paid off to allow construction, revealing small-town corruption alongside international warfare. This revelation connected to real Cold War paranoia and showed how governments will exploit anything for military advantage, even dimensional horrors that could end humanity. The Stranger Things 3. The game let players explore even more of the base, finding documents that revealed the Soviets had been planning this operation for years and had their own captured Demogorgon for study. The Russians building under the mall seemed insane, but their prisoner in that post-credits scene? That reveal doesn't pay off until 8 episodes later, and when it does, everything changes. Hopper's survival. The Season 3 finale destroyed us with Hopper's apparent sacrifice in the Russian bunker as the machine exploded. We watched Joyce close her eyes and flip the keys, seemingly vaporizing the man she'd finally admitted she cared about. The post-credits scene seemed to confirm it when Russians mentioned the American prisoner. But we assumed it was Brenner, or someone else, not Hopper. Season 4 opened by confirming the impossible. Hopper had survived the explosion and was now a prisoner in a Russian gulag. The twist worked because the show had earned our emotional investment in his death, making us genuinely grieve before pulling the rug out. The reveal that he'd jumped through a gate into the Upside Down at the last second, only to be captured by Russian forces stationed there, explained his survival without feeling cheap. His storyline in the Soviet labor camp brought a completely different genre into Stranger Things, prison escape thriller mixed with Cold War action. The letters he'd written to Eleven in Season 3 gained even more tragic weight, knowing she'd been reading dead man's words, while he was actually alive and suffering. Hopper's fight to survive while slowly learning about the Demogorgon the Russians were keeping captive gave us a parallel storyline that built toward the season finale's convergence. His transformation from small-town cop to interdimensional warrior cemented him as the series' most resilient character, someone who literally went to hell and fought his way back. Hopper surviving should have been the biggest twist, but the show had been hiding something even bigger since Season 1, a character we'd seen die who never actually did. Robin comes out. Steve and Robin's chemistry in Season 3 set up what looked like another romantic subplot. Steve was clearly falling for her, and everything pointed toward them, becoming a couple by season's end. Then, the bathroom confession scene at Starcourt flipped expectations completely when Robin revealed she's gay, and had been obsessed with Steve's girlfriend in high school, not Steve himself. This twist was revolutionary for the show because it prioritized genuine friendship over romantic tension, and gave us meaningful LGBTQ representation that felt organic rather than performative. Robin's vulnerability in admitting her sexuality to Steve while worrying about losing their friendship created one of the most emotionally honest moments in the series. Steve's acceptance and insistence on staying best friends rather than making it weird elevated his character growth from Season 1's shallow jerk to someone capable of unconditional support. The twist also made their dynamic infinitely more interesting because it removed sexual tension and replaced it with authentic platonic love. Later seasons showed them becoming inseparable partners in monster fighting, proving that not every male-female friendship needs romantic payoff. The moment resonated with fans so strongly that Robin became one of the most beloved characters, with her coming out scene praised as one of TV's best LGBTQ representations. It showed Stranger Things could deliver emotional twists that had nothing to do with monsters or conspiracies, but still fundamentally changed character relationships. Robin's twist was about identity. The next one is about transformation, watching the show's worst villain do something no one saw coming, Billy's redemption. Billy Hargrove spent Season 2 as an abusive racist piece of garbage who terrorized Max and nearly killed Steve. Season 3 made him even worse by having the Mind Flayer possess him, turning him into the primary antagonist building a flesh monster from melted humans. Nothing suggested he deserved redemption or would get it. The Starcourt battle finale shocked everyone when Billy fought back against the Mind Flayer's control at the last possible moment, sacrificing himself to save Eleven and giving Max closure she never expected. The twist worked because the show had put in the work earlier, showing Billy's own abuse at the hands of his father, not excusing his behavior, but explaining the cycle of violence that created him. His final stand against the monster, controlling him, became a metaphor for breaking that cycle, choosing to protect rather than harm in his last moments. Max's devastation at his death carried weight because the show acknowledged that abuse victims can have complicated feelings about their abusers, especially when they show glimpses of humanity. Billy's sacrifice didn't erase his sins, but it gave his character arc tragic dimension, rather than letting him die as a one-note villain. The scene became even more powerful because Dacre Montgomery's performance sold Billy's internal war against the Mind Flayer's control. Later, we learned through Max's trauma that his death left unresolved feelings that haunted her into Season 4, showing that redemption moments don't magically fix everything. Billy sacrificed himself to break the Mind Flayer's control, which makes what we learn later even more disturbing because that monster wasn't some alien entity at all. Kaylee exists. Season 2 dropped a completely unexpected episode that pulled away from Hawkins entirely. 11 tracked down another number from Hawkins' lab, 8, who turned out to be Kaylee, a woman with illusion powers leading a revenge crew in Chicago that hunted down former lab employees. This twist expanded the mythology by confirming what fans suspected. 11 wasn't the only child tortured in Brenner's experiments. Kaylee's powers differed completely, creating realistic hallucinations that could fool multiple people simultaneously, showing the experiments produced diverse abilities. Her approach to dealing with trauma involved violence and revenge, a dark mirror to Eleven's path of protection and found family. The episode divided fans because it paused the main plot for what felt like a backdoor pilot, but it gave crucial character development, showing Eleven choosing her real family over biological connection. Kaylee's crew represented what Eleven could become if she let anger consume her, a vigilante using powers to punish rather than protect. The comics later revealed more numbered children, like 6 and 9, expanding the scope of Brenner's crimes even further. The Lost Sister storyline also introduced the idea that other labs might exist with their own experimental subjects, opening narrative possibilities for future seasons. While Kaylee hasn't returned to the main show, her existence proved Eleven's powers weren't unique, and suggested other psychic children might be scattered across the country dealing with their own trauma. Kaylee was number 8, but she wasn't Brenner's first test subject. Number 1 was someone else entirely, and that truth breaks the entire series wide open. Vecna's identity. Season 4 built up this terrifying new monster-killing teenagers through supernatural curses, making him seem like a fresh horror from the Upside Down. Then Episode 7 delivered maybe the series' biggest twist. Vecna was actually Henry Creel, the first child Brenner experimented on, who became known as One in the Lab before 11 banked him to the Upside Down in 1979. This revelation unified every villain from previous seasons under one origin point, because Henry had psychically contacted the Mind Flayer and shaped the Upside Down's invasion plans from the beginning. The massacre at Hawkins' lab that traumatized 11 and killed the other children suddenly made sense. It was Henry breaking free and trying to escape. His whole speech about humanity being a plague and how he wanted to reshape reality explained the Mind Flayer's seemingly random attacks as calculated moves in a longer game. The show used extended flashbacks to establish Henry's backstory as a psychic child who murdered his own family in the 1950s, was locked up in a psychiatric hospital, and eventually ended up in Brenner's custody. His transformation into Vecna, after years in the Upside Down, showed what happens when someone with godlike powers loses all humanity and merges with an alien dimension. The twist recontextualized Brenner's entire program. He wasn't trying to create weapons, but to find another child like Henry he could control. The first Shadow stage play later expanded on young Henry's story, showing how his powers developed and how the Creel family tragedy actually unfolded. Vecna's identity reveal made every previous season feel like chapters in his plan, changing how we view the entire series. Henry becoming Vecna explained everything, but it raised one massive question. If 11 sent him to the Upside Down in 1979, where did that dimension come from? 11 creates the Upside Down. We'd always assumed the Upside Down existed independently as an alternate dimension. Season 4's deep dive into 11's repressed memories revealed something way more complicated. When she banished Henry to that dimension in 1979, her psychic power didn't just send him away, it fundamentally shaped that entire reality. The Upside Down being frozen on the day Will disappeared wasn't a random quirk. It was locked to that specific moment when 11 opened the gate in Season 1. This suggests her psychic connection to that dimension somehow crystallized it, creating a dark mirror of Hawkins that can't move forward in time. The implications are massive because it means 11 might not be just connected to the Upside Down, but partly responsible for its current form. Henry's transformation into Vecna in that dimension raises questions about whether the hostile environment was already there or if his corruption influenced its development. The Mind Flayer's consciousness might be Henry's psychic projection expanded across an entire dimension, making every monster an extension of his will. This twist changed the metaphysics of the show completely, suggesting psychic power can literally create realities, rather than just opening doors to existing ones. It also added another layer to 11's guilt complex, because she's not just responsible for the gate, but potentially for shaping the entire Nightmare dimension everyone's been fighting. The revelation that Hawkins exists in the Upside Down, exactly as it was in 1983, means they're not fighting an alien world, but a corrupted version of their own home. So 11 shaped the Upside Down with her powers, but that doesn't explain why it's frozen in time, or what that means for everyone trapped inside. Terry Ives' truth. Early seasons mentioned 11's birth mother Terry in passing as a woman driven insane by Brenner's experiments. The twist came in Season 2 when 11 finally met her and used her powers to dive into Terry's broken mind, discovering the full horrific truth of her origin. Terry wasn't crazy. She was psychically aware, but trapped in a catatonic loop, reliving the moment Brenner stole baby Jane from her arms. The memory showed Terry breaking into Hawkins' lab while pregnant, undergoing brutal sensory deprivation experiments, giving birth, and having Brenner literally rip the infant away while claiming the baby died. Her sister Becky had been telling the truth all along about the conspiracy, but nobody believed her because Terry's condition made her seem delusional. This revelation proved that Brenner's cruelty extended beyond just experimenting on children to destroying entire families and ruining lives. Terry's endless loop of trying to reach her daughter became one of the series' most heartbreaking elements. A mother's love preserved in Psychic Amber. The novel, Suspicious Minds, expanded this backstory extensively, showing Terry's time as a test subject and her growing friendship with other participants who became casualties of Brenner's ambitions. It revealed that Terry actually had some psychic abilities herself, which is why Brenner targeted her specifically, and why Jane inherited such powerful gifts. The connection between them, surviving their separation through dreams and psychic impressions, showed that not even Brenner could completely sever their bond. Terry lost everything to Brenner's experiments, but 11 wasn't the only child he stole, and one mother's revenge almost changed everything. Max's curse. Season 4 set up Max as suicidal after Billy's death, depressed and withdrawing from everyone. The twist came when we realized her emotional state wasn't just trauma, but made her a perfect target for Vecna, whose curse specifically attacked people dealing with guilt and depression. Max's hallucinations ramped up until that incredible episode 4 sequence in the graveyard where Vecna nearly killed her before running up that hill, broke through, and gave her the strength to escape. The show used her curse to explore how trauma and survivors' guilt can be as dangerous as any physical monster, turning internal pain into external threats. Her letters to everyone, revealing her genuine belief that she deserved to die for being relieved when Billy died, showed the complex psychology Vecna was exploiting. The fact that music could break his curse because it activates different parts of the brain gave a scientific angle to fighting supernatural evil. Max's temporary escape in episode 4 only delayed the inevitable, because Vecna was hunting her specifically, leading to the brutal finale where he succeeded in killing her briefly before Eleven psychically restarted her heart. Her current state, alive but comatose with unknown brain activity, leaves her fate uncertain going into Season 5. The twist showed that surviving monsters doesn't guarantee safety when your own mind becomes the battlefield. Max's arc turned mental health struggles into literal life or death stakes, while treating the subject matter with surprising sensitivity. Max escaped Vecna once using music. But the show was about to reveal why the Russians were so desperate to capture these creatures alive. Russian Demogorgon. The post-credits scene in Season 3 showed Russians with a captive Demogorgon, but most fans assumed it escaped from their failed gate experiments. Season 4 revealed something way worse. The Russians had successfully opened their own stable gateway and had been harvesting upside-down creatures for study and potential weaponization. This meant the threat wasn't contained to Hawkins at all. It had gone international, with a superpower actively trying to militarize dimensional horrors. The Russian base in Kamchatka had not just one but multiple creatures in containment, treating them like weapons research rather than existential threats to humanity. Hopper's survival depended on him fighting Demogorgons as prison entertainment, showing how the Russians viewed these monsters as tools rather than dangers. The revelation that they'd been coordinating with American traitors like Dr. Owen's predecessor revealed deep conspiracy rot in multiple governments. This twist expanded the endgame because even if Hawkins defeated Vecna, Russian military forces with access to the Upside Down could still destabilize reality. The comics explored other Russian operations, including attempts to create their own psychic soldiers, based on stolen Hawkins lab research. It showed that Brenner's crimes had consequences beyond Hawkins, that his research notes and test results had been shared or stolen, and were now fueling international incidents. The Russian Dimension program represented everything wrong with the Cold War arms race, competing powers racing toward mutually assured destruction while ignoring the actual apocalyptic consequences. The Russians had a stable gateway and captive monsters, which means someone gave them the blueprints to make it work. If you enjoyed this video and want to see how Stranger Things deaths were made, click the video on the screen.